All right, little technical difficulties, but we got underway. Thank you all very much for being here for our presentation on the Model Battery Energy Storage System, or BESS law. My name is Adam Carson. I am a principal planner with the Rockland County Department of Planning. I am also the executive director of the Rockland Municipal Planning Federation. The Federation is a nonprofit organization that was formed over 34 years ago, with one of its principal missions being to provide educational opportunities for land use board members so they can make better decisions on the land use applications that come before them. I'm going to do a few housekeeping items. Everyone's mics are muted, and your video is off. Only the panelists have access to the screens and to speak, but the Q&A function and the chat function is working. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation, but I'll try to monitor the chat and deal with anything that comes up. I believe I put my email in there at the beginning, but you may not see it because we're having some technical problems at the beginning. I'll put it in again in a few minutes. And I've also shared a file for the slides that you'll be seeing tonight. Just a quick note, this is not a fancy background. I am actually outside. I tested positive for COVID over the weekend, so I am isolating from my family. Hopefully my neighbors and the flock of crows that went by a few minutes ago will all cooperate, and it won't be too bad, and you'll still be able to see me once the sun goes down. People are probably wondering about certificates of attendance. First of all, Zoom records your attendance, so you do not need to do anything for that. It automatically records when you join and when you leave. The Rockland Municipal Planning Federation maintains a database for training for Rockland land use board members. So if you are a land use board members in Rockland County, you do not need a certificate of completion, but I will provide one on request. If you are outside of Rockland County and you wish to get a certificate of attendance, please email me after this is over. I'll share my email again. Normally I say give me a few days to respond. I'm actually going to bump that up to a week because I've been out of the office for a few days and there might be a lot of work for me when I get back. And before we get into our main presentation, we have a couple panelists here who want to share some important information. So the first person I'm going to call up is my colleague, Rich Schaffo. I don't think he said his camera's not working. I think he just doesn't want to, show his face on camera.
I'm going to spare everyone my face. How's that?
He's a striking man. You're missing,
or the picture, my kitchen, me sitting in my kitchen. No, I don't know. I can't. I tried 2 different cameras. It says Zoom hasn't enabled my camera, so I apologize for that. But again, my name is Rich Schaffo. I am the Deputy Commissioner of the Rockland County Planning Department, as well as a principal planner. And I just wanted to briefly mention, I'm also overseeing our new sustainability program, and the county has recently begun that program. We are both a climate smart community and a clean energy community under NYSERDA, which you'll hear more about in a few minutes, what the clean energy program is. But we became a climate smart community several years ago, but have more recently kind of taken some steps to become a certified climate smart community. We also have completed all the high impact actions for the clean energy program under NYSERDA, and have been bringing a little bit of funds into the county to try to make some transition to some electric equipment, particularly landscaping equipment. So I just wanted to note that the county is in its early infancy stages of beginning a sustainability program. The county has brought on a sustainability coordinator to lead those efforts, because it is at least a 1-person full-time job to work through both the climate smart community and the clean energy programs from NYSERDA. She is on this webinar, I believe, if Tyler is in attendance. And we just received some funding from the state to create to do a county greenhouse gas emissions inventory as well as a county climate action plan focused on government operations. We're going to look at our own operations first to see where we can make some changes in reducing our energy use and reducing our emissions. So I just wanted to let folks know as we talk specifically about the clean energy program and about battery energy storage systems that the county is taking some steps to move forward with addressing these very issues. So thank you. And thank you for the NYSERDA folks for taking the time to talk to us tonight.
All right. Thanks, Rich. Thanks for that information. Appreciate it. Yeah, so Rich told us a little bit about what the county is doing within the Clean Energy Communities Plan. Having with us tonight, we actually have someone who can tell us more information about that program and what it might mean for your community. So our other panelist is Meenakshi Viswanathan. I realize that's the first time I've said that out loud. I hope I got that close. Meena is the Clean Energy Communities Coordinator with the Hudson Valley Regional Council. So she asked just to give you guys a little bit of information about that program. And that program is what's bringing tonight's educational session. This is one of the actions that the county could take to earn credits. So not only are we hopefully all learning something tonight, but the county is making progress towards that Clean Energy Communities goal. So Meena, you're muted right now. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. I'm going to share my screen and go over a presentation super quickly. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Meena. I am a Clean Energy Communities Coordinator at the Hudson Valley Regional Council. So our organization helps municipalities and county governments in the Mid-Hudson region with environmental and sustainability-related programs, including the Clean Energy Communities Program, which has been established by NYSERDA to help communities in New York State transition to clean energy. So as of now, there are 933 communities that are participating in the program with 588 CEC designated communities. The Mid-Hudson region actually leads the state in terms of engagement in the program. By becoming a CEC designated community, municipalities can receive no-match grants from NYSERDA to fund clean energy projects that can lower utility bills in homes and municipal buildings and pave the way for green jobs. So the program also offers technical assistance through the Clean Energy Communities Coordinator. Like I mentioned, I am the CEC coordinator for Rockland County municipalities, and my colleague Eleanor works with the Rockland County government. And we can help you navigate this program, and we have resources and toolkits that you can access to get grants from this program. So the way that the CEC program works is it's on a point-based system. Municipalities can complete high-impact actions to earn points. The more energy an action saves, roughly the more points you earn. So once you hit a certain level of points, you can access grants associated with those levels. And essentially, the more points that you earn, the more grants that you can unlock. And you can use these grants to fund clean energy projects that you can get credit for in the system and unlock even more grants. So the program is built in a cyclical manner. So here you can see the different levels of grant funding associated with the points. By completing 4 high-impact actions, a community can become CEC designated and receive $5,000. And as you can see, the more points you earn, the more grants you can unlock. And for small municipalities, this can lead up to $250,000 in grants. And for large municipalities, this can be $350,000. The grant amounts do decrease slightly after October, but you can see that this is still a lot of money that municipalities can access. So these are the different high impact actions that you can complete to get points. This is a wide range of actions that municipalities can choose to do based on communities' needs and interests. And as your CEC coordinator, I'm here to help you figure out a strategy and work with the community in understanding what actions would be best suited for the community's needs and interests. So if your municipality is interested in the program, please do reach out to me or to Eleanor. I will share my email ID in the chat in the Zoom later, and we can have a discussion in greater detail about how the program can help your community. Thank you. Yeah, that's all I had for you today.
Great. All right. Thank you, Mina. All right. So now we'll get to the main course, as it were. The state of New York has set some very ambitious climate goals. The New York State Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act has set a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 85% from 1990 levels. Most people, when they hear that, they think about solar panels, they think about wind farms. But what might be slightly less obvious is the need for these battery energy storage systems, because quite simply, we need power when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. Also, with extreme weather events becoming more common, finding ways to increase our power grid's resiliency becomes more important. So hopefully what we will learn today is ways to incorporate this very essential piece of infrastructure into our land use policies. And helping us out with that tonight is Camille Warner. Camille is a project manager on NYSERDA's Clean Energy Siting team. She works directly with local governments to develop permitting procedures to support reasonably sited land-based renewable energy facilities. She also works with industry stakeholders, community members, and state agencies to further New York State's clean energy goals. Camille relies on years of experience as a project manager in the renewable energy market, ensuring the successful development of small and large-scale solar projects, as a wetland scientist knowledgeable of state and federal environmental permitting regulations, and as an environmental educator and community outreach leader, where she excelled at educating and inspiring future leaders. Camille holds a master's degree in plant science and biotechnology from the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, and has a bachelor's in biological sciences from SUNY College at Old Westbury. So with that, I will turn it over to the capable hands of Camille, who will share her screen. You are still muted right now, Camille, so please unmute yourself. And in case the crows come back, I'll mute myself for the time being. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I hope you all are well. So I will begin talking. Okay. So hi, my name is Camille Warner. I am a project manager at NYSERDA. Today we're going to take a deep dive into the world of battery energy storage systems and kind of understand a little bit about the technology, about why we're seeing the technology kind of in our communities. And then we're going to jump into the model law that NYSERDA has for municipalities to review, modify, and adopt to regulate energy storage systems. Perfect. So very briefly, so I am on the Clean Energy Siting team, and this team offers a number of resources to empower local governments like yourselves with the knowledge, training, and best practices to manage responsible clean energy development in your communities across the state. These resources include step-by-step instructions, model laws, one of which we'll go through today, and various tools and techniques to guide the implementation of various clean energy technologies. We talk about anything from permitting processes, property taxes, siting, decommissioning, zoning, and so much more. We are constantly looking for ways to update and improve our resources. And while we're not talking about it today, one of the resources that I'll flag very quickly for you is the Inflation Reduction Act guide, which is highlighted in red on your screen. So that is a guide directed towards you, local governments, for you to receive tax credits for having solar or storage projects on your land. So it's a really, really great resource. And we keep it updated. So it's updated on our website monthly with any additional information that the IRS has with respect to the IRA. So I highly recommend checking it out. It's a really great resource. The other thing that my team does is we offer in-person training. So if you have a planning board meeting and you're drafting solar law, model wind law, a battery energy storage law, we're happy to pop into your planning board meeting and talk it out, or answer any questions that you may have. So very briefly, this is kind of the agenda for the day. So we're going to talk about kind of why you're seeing the technologies in your communities. I'm going to give an introduction on what exactly battery energy storage systems are. We're going to go over the model law, and then at the end, we're going to do fire safety and best practices, and then we'll save questions and answers for the end. So very quickly. So I'll just, again, very quickly set the stage for why you're seeing the energy storage systems in your community. So it's basically because of the CLCPA, or the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, aka the Climate Act. So this was signed into law in 2019, and it demonstrates New York's commitment to fighting climate change, transforming our economies, and building what's known as resilient communities. It's setting the path for a zero-emission electric sector and for decarbonizing the economy. There are a number of aggressive goals, including greenhouse gas reduction goals, so 40% reduction by 2030, 85% by 2050. There are electricity sector goals, so 70% renewable energy by 2030, 100% renewable by 2040. And then there are what's called technology-specific goals, so having 10,000 megawatts of distributed solar by 2030, and 3,000 megawatts of energy storage by 2030. So this is a really good graphic that kind of shows you what the Climate Act is requiring of the state. On the next slide, I'll highlight kind of energy storage incentives, but keep in mind there are other technologies that are important to meeting our goals. It isn't just solar, it isn't just wind, it isn't just batteries. As you saw in the previous slide, energy storage will play a critical role towards achieving the state's goals. The CLCPA target of 30 megawatts of energy storage by 2030 was actually increased to 6,000 megawatts by 2030 per the governor's state of address. There are a number of benefits to battery energy storage, and we'll go through a number of them in a later section of the presentation. But the better we can get at identifying and solving energy sector challenges in sustainable ways, the easier and cheaper it will be to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. To that end, battery energy storage systems offers a number of benefits, including avoiding carbon dioxide emissions, facilitating intermittent renewables that are available during peak demand. So when the sun isn't shining, when the wind isn't blowing, it can reduce the impact of outages and create jobs. To look at it another way, about 4 hours of energy storage capacity at 3,000 megawatts could supply 40% of residential homes across the state. And that's a really powerful number. NYSERDA also offers a number of energy storage incentives. So there's a $400 million incentive for retail. So retail's less than 5 megawatts. And then there's also going to be even more incentives since the Public Service Commission recently approved the energy storage roadmap. So more incentives will be along the way. NYSERDA also offers technical assistance, so assistance like this programs, assistance in interconnection, customer acquisition, and financing resources. So let's jump into it. This might be a little bit of science for all of you who love science as much as I do. So we're going to break up the words of battery energy storage systems and define it kind of in pieces. So we're going to zoom out and start with the high kind of overview of energy storage. So potential energy simply means stored energy. Energy storage systems hold energy in one form, so whether it's kinetic, electrical, or any other kind of form of energy, and then it converts it into another form of electricity, like electrical energy, which can be used or dispatched for further use or used as available. There are a number of different ways that energy storage systems can store and dispatch energy. So we have electrical energy storage, and that's what we'll focus on today. So that's your battery energy storage. It utilizes the potential energy, that stored energy of electrons. So when force is applied to those electrons, it causes them to release electricity, like a battery. So the battery that's in your TV remote or the battery that's in your laptop. There's also gravitational energy storage, and uses the potential energy, so stored energy of gravity, and it consists of dropping or releasing something from up high and using that force of that falling object to generate electricity. So an example of that would be a pumped hydroelectric facility. The next kind of type of stored energy is mechanical energy storage, and this utilizes the potential and kinetic energy of a moving object, so like a flywheel. So flywheels are a vacuum chamber. You can see it on the picture here, the big blue chamber. So it's a vacuum chamber that charges up and spins a very heavy rotor at high speeds, utilizing a generator to convert the mechanical energy back into electrical energy. And then we have thermal, and thermal uses, an example of that is when you use electricity to make ice when the electricity is cheap, and then you use that energy to cool down a building when prices are high or demand is high. So there are 5 overarching buckets, if you will, of energy storage types: pumped hydroelectric, mechanical, thermal, electrochemical, and chemical. Pumped hydro and electrochemical dominate the market today. Pumped hydro is something that you're probably familiar with. So pumping water in an elevated reservoir when prices are low, and then releasing it to spin turbines to generate electricity when demand is high. This technology, while it is very, very efficient, there is limited future development on new sites. And then electrochemical, the second very popular technology that dominates the market, is what you think of when you think of as a battery. So again, this is what powers your laptops, your cell phones, electric cars, and so on. So zooming in a little bit. So battery energy storage systems are electrical energy storage systems. So again, a system that utilizes the potential energy of electrons. And these are specifically electrochemical energy storage systems. It's a mouthful. Basically, batteries. These systems are very, very flexible. They can be portable, stationary. They can be switched on and off relatively quickly. And there are many different types of battery energy storage systems, but my presentation today is going to focus on lithium-ion batteries. It's the prevailing chemistry in battery energy storage systems today. And on the next slide, we'll talk about why. So what are the building blocks of a BESS system, a battery energy storage system? So the building blocks are cells, modules, and racks. And cells, if you remember from basic bio, are the basic building blocks of life. It's the same with these systems. Cells are the individual units consisting of an anode, so a positively charged electrode, and a cathode, a negatively charged electrode. And then it has an electrolyte. An electrolyte is a conductive material that's between the anode and the cathode. So when you charge a battery, the electron moves from the anode to the cathode through the electrode. A grouping of these cells, or these really small units, are called modules. And this can consist of a number of cells typically wired together in series or in parallel. And these are capable of storing or dispatching energy. And then finally, we have a group of those modules called a energy storage rack. And you can see them kind of in the picture here, just layers of racks. So this slide summarizes why lithium ion is the prevailing chemistry. So let's kind of dive into this. So lithium ion has a higher round trip charge efficiency, meaning it can discharge more energy with less loss, which is really important. It also has a lower duration. So duration is the time it takes to discharge. So it can discharge very, very quickly. If you look across the chart, the time to build is approximately the same across the different battery energy types. There is a minimum operation and maintenance cost compared to the other battery technologies. It's portable, it's readily available. space required. So due to the energy density of lithium ion, it's very, very dense, packed together. The batteries can take up a smaller space relative to competing forms of energy storage. So compared to lead acid and sodium, sulfur, etc. So lithium ion stores the most energy per weight or volume of any battery that's currently on the market. Life cycle. So life cycle means the number of times you can charge and discharge. So for lithium ion, it's anywhere between 20 and 25 years. And then maturity, and this is a big one. So lithium ion batteries are widely utilized with high market penetrations, including your cell phones, electric vehicles, laptops, tablets, electric toothbrushes, scooters, power tools, etc. They're absolutely everywhere. So let's take a look at battery energy storage systems. I might start calling it BESS to shorten it for a bit, as a whole. So there's a couple of ways to classify BESS systems. The first is based on the size and function. So when you're talking about size and function, you can define it as residential, commercial, or utility scale. Residential systems typically store and provide power directly to that residence, to that parcel, to that building. These systems are typically very small and measured in kilowatt hours. Commercial systems are a little bit larger and can provide power up to a few megawatts per hour, and utility systems are even larger, and you can see the pictures for scale, and they can provide up to a number of gigawatt hours. The second way you can define battery energy storage systems is by where they exist in relation to the electric grid. So they can be called behind the meter systems or front of the meter systems. So behind the meter systems refers to the energy systems that are located on the customer side of the utility utility meter, excuse me. The power can be used on site and it can offset a local load. So commercial behind the meter systems are up to 5 megawatts typically. And this is because of peak shaving. We'll talk about that in a later slide. Utility scale battery energy storage systems are much, much larger and cannot offset a local load. The energy that is stored and generated is directly injected into the electric grid. So why are we talking about batteries? So renewable generating facilities, so wind, solar, hydro, etc., they can be used, actually, and the electric grid can be used to charge up battery energy storage systems, which can then be used to provide power directly to homes and businesses, or it can be put back on the grid and used as needed when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. Energy storage systems are kind of a backup energy system for homes and businesses. They provide economic and environmental benefits to the customers and to the electric grid. They also help deliver electricity to meet the demand of customers and increase grid reliability. And grid reliability is really key and crucial as we move forward and use more and more energy. So this is probably one of my favorite slides in the deck. It's a really great graphic from Rocky Mountain Institute, which breaks down the 13 key benefits and services provided by BESS systems into 3 distinct groups. It breaks it up into grid services, utility services, and customer services. And by services, I mean benefits. So how does battery energy storage systems benefit the grid, benefit utility, and then benefit us, the customers? Just to explain the graph a little bit, so the bit in the circle in the red here, this is related to benefits that go to transmission systems. The next one is distribution systems, so up to 5 megawatts, and then the light pink are behind the meter systems, so typically your very small residential systems. And we'll kind of tear this apart so we can understand why battery energy storage systems are so important and crucial for grid reliability. So the first one is grid services. So these are your ISOs and your ARTOs. So ISO stands for Independent System Operator. And RTO stands for Regional Transmission Organizations. In New York, we have the New York ISO, or the New York Independent System Operator. So the first benefit to NYSO is what's called energy arbitrage. And so this is a technique where power is purchased during off-peak hours. So when grid prices are the cheapest, it's then stored and then used during peak hours when electricity prices are the highest. This service is about managing costs and curtailment. And curtailment is when renewables are producing too much energy. So battery energy storage systems can help keep the grid in balance. The next benefit to the NYSO is called spin non-spin reserve. And this has to do with generation and responsive load when the system is on or offline. A battery energy storage system can step in if it's going to take a little bit of time for a grid to become fully responsive. The next three bullets speak to the importance of grid reliability and balancing energy supply and demand. Frequency regulation and voltage support are ancillary services. These services are absolutely necessary to ensure that generation resources have enough capacity and energy to service customers, us, while maintaining the reliability of New York's transmission system as a whole. And finally, Black Start. Black Start is about resilience. It helps large generators come back online following a system failure. So these are benefits, again, for the NYSO, for like the big organization. These are the benefits to the utility services. So Con Ed, NYSEG, Central Hudson, National Grid, Orange and Rockland. So battery energy storage systems can help with what's called distribution and transmission deferral. They can help lower electric rates to avoid the need to build out additional fossil fuel power stations. They can also relieve congestion in areas with lots of generation or in areas that have inadequate transmission capacity to make sure the end users, us, have enough capacity to keep the lights on. And finally, customer services. How does this benefit us, a normal, everyday human? Although it's weird to call myself a human because it implies that I'm not, but I am. So customer services. So battery energy storage systems can provide power during an outage. When battery energy storage systems are paired with solar, it's easy to utilize your energy generation when the sun isn't shining. They can also provide demand charge reduction and time of bill management. So it's normal for energy usage to fluctuate throughout the day. So during high demand, so like when everyone comes home at nights, they plug in their laptops, their cell phones, they put on the TV, they start cooking dinner. During those periods of high demand, the utility companies will charge a higher rate, also known as a demand charge, to encourage us to lower energy uses and lower the demand on the grid. So peak shaving is a strategy to avoid these extra charges by either reducing power consumption or by utilizing a separate power generation equipment like a battery storage system to temporarily power that home or that facility or that equipment during these on-peak or high demand times. A really good example of this is peaker plant replacement. So a peaker plant is a power plant that grid operators call on during times of particularly high electricity demand on the grid. So these peaker plants supply power that is not only high in cost, but typically they release a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So battery energy storage systems can be used to replace these fossil fuel peaker plants. These plants typically sit around unused most of the time, waiting for the hours or days where the load on the grid is the highest. So the hottest days in the summer when everyone is cranking their AC, or the coldest days in winter where everyone has their heat cranked on. During those times of high peak demand, the batteries can do the job better, fire up almost instantly, and provide other grid services like the ones that we mentioned before with zero emissions. So we've defined battery energy storage. We talked about kind of the benefits of them. So let's talk about the different land use and local considerations when considering looking to regulate these technologies. So all technologies have these general considerations. So making sure they're in the right zoning district, evaluating any environmental impacts, making sure they follow bulk area standards, decommissioning, taxation. For solar, you have things like visual and aesthetic impacts, agricultural land impacts, wind, you might have noise or shadow flicker or visual impacts. And then for energy storage, another consideration is fire safety and incident management training. So even though your municipality, your planning board, your zoning board, etc., are not responsible for fire safety, I will go over a few recommendations that should be considered for adoption in your local law. Keep in mind that there are a number of fire code, residential codes, etc., that are applicable statewide, so they do not need to be included in your local law. They are already applicable statewide without needing to be included. I also want to be cognizant that there are other key technologies and considerations that are imperative to help us reach our climate and energy goals. These include EVs, hydrogen, other energy efficiency measures, etc. So what should you do before looking to draft or update your energy model law? So the first thing I always recommend is taking a look at any existing plans or policies that you have on the books. If you have any climate action plans, etc., make sure they're updated and align with the local law that you're drafting. Review hosting capacity maps. Take a look at your comprehensive plan. Make sure that it includes a strategy for renewable energy development. Conduct outreach with the community. You want to make sure that everyone has a voice and is heard. And then as needed, create a working group with subject matter experts, etc., to go over policies and plans to make sure that you're removing barriers to facilitate BESS development goals. So permitting these systems depend on whether or not they're paired with generation. So if the BESS system is paired with another renewable generator, so solar, wind, etc., and it's less than 25 megawatts, it will be permitted at the local level with you through seeker or whatever municipal or county requirements are on the books. If it's paired with solar or wind or renewable generator and it's greater than 25 megawatts, it will be permitted at the state level through either Article 10 or the Office of Renewable Energy Siting and Electric Transmission, aka ORES. If it's a standalone system and it's less than or equal to 80 megawatts, it'll be permitted at the local level with you. And then if it's a standalone system, it'll be subject to licensing by the PSC and any other seeker or state requirements that are applicable. So jumping into the fun part. So as you know, NYSERDA has a number of really great resources, including this battery energy system guidebook. And this is a really good guidebook. It kind of details out all the things that a municipality might wonder about when it comes to battery energy storage systems. We're going to focus today on the Model Law, Chapter 1. So these are the sections of the model law, and I'm going to just walk you through it, so I'm just going to keep moving. So section 1 is the authority. So this section highlights references the appropriate zoning statutes from the New York Municipal Home Rule Law, which enables the adoption of local ordinances such as this one. Keep in mind, you'll see grayed out areas throughout the kind of copied and paste sections. These are what I like to call a choose your own adventure novel. So if you're a town, you're going to make sure you select the town portion. If you're a village, you'll select the village portion, etc. So the grayed areas are a choose your own adventure section portion. For tier 1, so I'm going to jump into definitions. So tier 1 systems we define as a BESS system that have an aggregate or total energy capacity that's less than or equal to 600 kilowatt hours. And if it's in a room or an enclosed area like a garage, it can only consist of one energy system type, so only lithium ion. For tier 2, these systems are greater than 600 kilowatt hours and or they can be comprised of more than one battery energy technology in a room or an enclosed area. So just a couple of pictures to kind of, for point of reference. So tier 1 are typically pretty small systems. These are your residential and commercial systems. And if you remember from an earlier slide, these are your behind the meter systems. So they're powering a local load, that home, that parcel, that organization, etc. And these are some pictures of tier 2 systems. These are more similar to what a utility scale system would like, so typically a little bit larger. So Section 6 and Section 7 go over the model law permitting requirements. For tier 1, so these are your small systems, typically very residential, we recommend a battery energy storage system permit. This permit's not unlike the solar one that we have for residential solar systems. An inspection checklist, and making sure that the homeowner or whoever owns the system and is designing and constructing the system is following any applicable fire codes. Section 7 talks about tier 2 systems, and these systems we recommend either a special use permit or site plan review, and then making sure the application, the system follows the applicable fire code. So tearing these apart. So tier 1, so these are your systems that are up to 600 kilowatt hours. So this on the left, you can see a picture of the kind of model permit, and I've pulled out a couple of sections just to highlight. So this model permit is designed to establish the minimal submittal requirements for electrical and structural plan review that are necessary when permitting a tier 1, aka residential and very small commercial systems that are up to 600 kilowatt hours. This model permit is 100% customizable, choose your own adventure. So you can pick the fee schedule, payment methods, whatever your municipality would like. The next part of this model permit is talks about or makes the applicant discuss the type of use. Is it residential? Is it commercial? How big is it? What are the kilowatt hours? What's the technology, lithium, lead acid, etc. And the installation type, indoor, outdoor, etc. And that's key because there's going to be different requirements depending on where the system is located. And when I say different requirements, I mean like by state code. This section details the submittal requirements. So this includes construction documents signed by a New York State licensed engineer, compliance with all applicable uniform and fire codes, etc. And you'll hear this will be a broken record in your head that keep in mind that fire codes, residential codes, etc., are applicable statewide, so they don't need to be replicated in your local law. So jumping now to tier 2 systems. So this slide kind of details the process for approval, and again, the gray areas is choose your own adventure. So the first thing is choosing what zoning districts to permit the systems. Reviewing the application for completedness in 10 business days or X business days, letting the applicant know this is a complete application, this is not. The applicant should be subject to a public hearing, published in a newspaper, and then as needed per GML, General Municipal Law, Section 239 L through N, referring it to the county as needed. And then after the closing of the public hearing, the board will review for 60 days, but that 60-day period may be extended if both parties agree. And then we have different requirements for approval, and we will break this, or I will break, oh no, go back. And I will break this out for you. Apologies for the flipping. So jumping into your tier 2, and again, these are your systems that are 600 kilowatt hours or greater. So the first requirement we recommend has to do with your utility lines and your electrical circuitry. So we do recommend that all on-site utility lines are placed underground to the extent feasible and permitted by the serving utility. So this is 100% true, and we do recommend it, but the caveat I'll let you know is that this is entirely up to the utility company. The utility company is required to make sure that they maintain service and reliability of the service. And if the utility company says, I'm sorry, you can't place the lines underground, then that's, it's up to the utility company to make sure that happens. As far as signage, so signage shall be in compliance with American National Standards Institute, Section 7, Z535, and it should list the special hazards, the type of system, 24-hour contact information, a phone number, etc. Any emergency shutoff information, etc., should be very easily to see on a highly reflective surface. As far as lighting, very minimal lighting, anything that's minimally required for safety and operational purposes, you don't want to contribute to light pollution. So it should be shielded downcast and not, shooting in the neighbor's living room. So just whatever is needed for safety and operational purposes. Vegetation and tree cutting. 10 feet on each side of the Tier 2 BESS system should be cleared of all combustible vegetation or any kind of growth. So single species of trees, shrubberies, or that kind of ground cover can be used, as long as it doesn't readily transmit fire. 10 feet is per the fire code. And this needs to be maintained even after the system is built. It needs to be maintained for the entire life of the project. Noise, we recommend a noise level of 60 decibels. These systems sound very much like an AC. It's an HVAC system to keep the system cool. Yes, so it's not going to generate noise compared to a highway or a busy intersection. The noise you'll hear will be the HVAC system to keep the system cool. Here. The next section of the model law is decommissioning, and this is one of my favorite topics. So decommissioning plan, so we recommend two things, a decommissioning plan and having a way to collect decommissioning funds. So the decommissioning plan should detail the anticipated life of the system, what's going to trigger decommissioning. So if the system's not running for 2 years, perhaps that triggers decommissioning. It should include an estimation of decommissioning costs, how that estimate was determined, obviously by a qualified party to make that kind of statement, a method to keep the decommissioning costs current, and then how will that system be decommissioned and the site restored. As for the fund, it's important to make sure the applicant submits decommissioning costs in a way that's your municipality is agreeable to, whether it's a bond or a letter of credit, whatever your municipality is comfortable with. But this is very, very crucial. We do recommend revisiting decommissioning cost estimates every 4 or 5 years, just to make sure it's keeping up with existing financial landscape. The next section for Tier 2 permitting are kind of the site plan application. What should that application look like? So we recommend the standard things that you'd see in any other application, property lines, any landscaping changes, grading, vegetation, lighting, etc. A 1 and 3 line electrical diagram that shows shutoff mechanisms, NEC or National Electric Code compliant mechanisms, etc. Equipment specification sheet, contact information for the system installer, the owner, operator, the name of the project applicant or the owner, whoever is going to be in charge of that system and making sure the code is followed, what zoning district it's in, etc. The two I'll focus on is I'll define commissioning plan, but we'll talk about it on the other slide. So this is required by the fire code, and it basically documents that the energy storage system functions according to how it was designed. Number 9 and 13 is kind of where we'll spend the bulk of our time on this slide. So 9 is a fire safety compliance plan. So this is not required by the fire code. This plan makes sure that the system is up to snuff with regard to fire prevention and fire mitigation. It should include all code compliant precautions and kind of demonstrate that the components will make sure the system is safe. Again, it's not required by fire code, so we do recommend that you include this as a part of your permit application requirements. The next is the emergency operations plan. So in the event that, so if something were to go wrong, you want to make sure that there's a designated protocol and best practices for incident management. Your local first responders and fire officials want to know that you're looking out for them. So this plan should be geared towards first responders. They should know where the deflagration panels are. They should know whether or not they can use water. Work with the fire department to review this. This is not included or required by fire code right now, so we do recommend that you include this as a part of your application requirements. The next section is safety section of the model law. So site access. So the energy storage system should be maintained in good working order and in accordance with industry standards and New York State codes, etc. Site access should be maintained, including snow removal at a level that's acceptable to the local fire department, or if it's in an ambulance district, the local ambulance corps. And then C, the system should be enclosed in weatherproof enclosures and marked with the environmental rating suitable for the type of enclosure that it's in. And it needs to be compliant with NFPA 70. NFPA 70 is a National Fire Protection Association. Yeah. And then I have a couple of fun add-ons. If you're the planning board, we do recommend that you require emergency response plans and training as a part of site plan review. The authorities planning boards have the jurisdiction to require this as a part of your site plan review. The emergency response plan must be accessible on site and shared with the local fire department. Site-specific training should be offered for the local fire department to familiarize themselves with the project, any hazards associated with the system, and any procedures outlined in the ERP, Emergency Response Plan. We do also recommend annual trainings to be required to address any potential turnover, and that you maintain a log of training records so you know that on this day, this person was trained, etc. The next one that we recommend that planning boards do is make enhanced signing a requirement for a site plan review. So this includes signage beyond the battery energy storage unit itself to include perimeter fences or security barriers. Ideally, it should have a map of the site, the location of the different enclosures and any associated equipment. It should clearly display 24-hour emergency contact information, any hazard warnings, and this is simply to improve safety and clear communication for emergency responders and the public. Let's see. Perfect. For code enforcement officers, we recommend, let me just make sure I get all of this, that code enforcement officers have the authority to require peer review. So this is very, very, very crucial. And in a couple of slides, I'll explain why, but just for this section. So peer review is very, very important. You want to make sure that your municipality has the kind of experts to review permit applications and make sure that they're compliant with existing fire code requirements. Currently, the fire code does give you AHJs the authority to require that the developer pay for the independent peer review of a permit application. Despite this, they're not typically utilized. So we highly, highly recommend that peer reviews are mandatory for all battery energy storage installations to make sure that they're compliant and that there's oversight for upcoming projects. For code enforcement, we also recommend that, and not only recommend that, but you have the authority to require what's called fire mitigation personnel. And these are qualified persons or representatives of the system with the knowledge of that system that can be deployed on site to support local emergency responders. So you have the authority to require it. So require it because it's good. And the last one is a commissioning plan. So this plan requires the AHJ, authorities having jurisdiction, the code enforcement officer, to have proof of emergency response team. So you shouldn't have to do anything. There are 12 requirements of the commissioning plan. And requirement 11 is that the developer needs to prove that they have a contract with an entity that will respond to an incident and dispose of a battery system. So that's an important one, and I'll say that again. So as a part of the commissioning plan requirements, the developer needs to prove that they have a contract with an entity that will respond to an incident and dispose of a battery system. Cool. So I will jump now to fire safety and best practices. And I'll start this topic by talking about a part of the BESS system that I've not yet brought up, the BMS. So the battery management system is basically the eyes and ears of the system. Residential, commercial, and utility systems all have a BMS, battery management system. So this is a early warning system, or early warning sign detection, and can often react to issues that may arise. It can control the flow of electricity in and out of the system. Yeah, and so we'll talk about what that means and why it's important. So the phrase or the words you've often may have heard before is thermal runaway. So thermal runaway is a situation where the current, the electricity flowing through the cell or the battery can charge or overcharge the cell, causing the temperature to rise, which increases the current, which then increases the temperature. It's like a cyclical cycle. So this image is a really great image of what thermal runaway is. So in lithium-ion cells, there's a movement of electrons and lithium ions to produce electricity. This process of charging and discharging normally is accompanied with a small amount of heat. So when you charge your cell phones, you can feel it getting a little bit warmer on the back. I often take my cell phone case off just so it kind of cools out a little bit. It's not unlike that. So in ideal situations, that heat is able to dissipate from the cell. But in a thermal runaway, the lithium-ion cell generates heat at a rate that's higher than the rate that it can dissipate. So this can cause an uncontrolled increase in the temperature near that cell. And this can cause the destruction of the battery, or in very severe cases, a fire. So if we're looking at the image, in row 1, you can see that if you kind of pierce or damage that one cell, that's going to start to go into over runaway. So it's going to get very, very hot. And then the cells next to it are going to get hot and jump into thermal runaway. And that's kind of how the process works. So it goes from kind of section 1 to section 3. And section 4, sometimes water can be an effective agent at stopping the propagation. But again, it's not putting out the fire. It's just cooling down the system. So it's not unlike a gas pipe fire. You shut off the gas and control the flame. You don't try to put the fire out. So this is one of my other favorite slides, simply because it's a really good visual of what thermal runaway is and what happens. So in thermal runaway, we have 2 different regions or sections. The first is the preventative region, and the second is the containment region. In the preventative region, the system is trying to prevent thermal runaway. There's different steps and mechanisms that not only the battery management system does, but any other safety devices programmed in or installed in can actually try to prevent thermal runaway. So you kind of start with a battery abuse if there's like a mechanical, thermal, or physical abuse. After that, there's off-gassing due to a rise in temperature, so it's simply trying to get the heat away from that cell. Once you get into the containment region, there's smoke, thermal runaway has begun, and that must be contained. And if it's not contained, then fire, and then propagation to cells if it's not contained. Actually, this is probably the slide I like more. So this is a really neat slide that shows you the different protection methods that exist at the various different stages. And these are designed to prevent, contain, and mitigate thermal runaway before it occurs or once it starts occurring. So in the preventative region, we have systems that look at that monitor and look at in lifetime, like 24 hours, monitor the cell quality, monitor environmental system controls. We have the BMS, which we talked about those. Again, that's the eyes, the ears, the brain of the system, off-gas detection, etc. So off-gas detection is a very specific gas monitoring solution that notifies battery operators, so the people that's like watching and maintaining the system, at the earliest presence of any kind of gas. If in the unlikely event that thermal runaway cannot be contained, there's a number of protection methods that are in this containment region, including smoke detection, different kinds of low flammable limit gas detection, fire suppression, etc. So in addition to the actual physical systems designed to prevent and contain instances, there are a ton of codes and standards that govern these technologies. All of these on the screen address storage. We'll start with UL. So UL stands for Underwriters Laboratory. This is a hands-on kind of group. It's looking to certify safety. The International Fire Code, you can see a picture of the current code. This is legally binding. So we did have a draft version of the 2024 code, and the final version should be released shortly if it hasn't been already. The IFC, or the International Fire Code, is on a 3-year update cycle. So we just had a new update, and the New York State Code also has a 3-year cycle, but it's a year behind the International Fire Code. So in 2025, there's going to be an update for the New York State Fire Code, and it's likely going to kind of steal really great updates from this year's International Fire Code. And then you have your NFPAs, and these govern kind of every part of energy storage systems. NFPA 855 is the kind of big bulk code. It's the standard for installation of these stationary systems. And then all of your other codes like NFPA 12, 13, etc. These reference battery energy storage in one system or another. For example, the National Electric Code. So as you know, fire protection is important. And so I like to go over the slide so we understand the evolution of the codes and standards. So Underwriters Laboratory, International Code Council, and other organizations have introduced and updated their codes to include language that speaks to energy storage systems. So in 2016, UL published the first edition of a listing standard for energy storage systems. And this UL 9540 was published to certify that all the components work in harmony. A lot of times when you look at your electrical devices, sometimes your laptops, my computer mouse actually has it. You can see like a UL kind of stamp. It certifies that the components work in harmony. It's a certification. In 2017, UL 9540A was developed. This is not a certification, it's a destructive test that provides data to you to review to make sure that you're making informed siting decisions. This UL 9540A is not a pass or a fail test. It simply tells you how the system will behave under a stressful situation. This is why peer review is crucial, because you'll get developers handing you a very thick 9540A and saying, well, here's the data, but you need someone that speaks battery energy storage and is able to understand what that test result is actually saying. In 2018, the International Code Council introduced Chapter 12 of the Energy Storage System to the International Fire Code, which was exciting. In 2019, the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, releases NFPA 855, and this is kind of the standard for installation of energy storage systems. And at the same year, UL published the 4th edition of the UL 9540A. 9540A, again, is that destructive test, not a pass or fail. It just tells you, here are the results, here's what's happened. Keep in mind that all of these are living documents. They're constantly being reviewed and constantly being updated. as I mentioned before. So jumping into a little bit about 9540A testing. So this is required by fire code for every large scale, so 600 kilowatt hours or greater, so tier 2 product. Smaller projects or products often opt to go through the test for a number of reasons, including that they can have a relaxed code if the fire test can demonstrate that. And we'll talk about that in a couple slides. Again, this is a destructive test to make sure fire doesn't spread. It's done in stages, starting at the cell level, then moving all the way up to the installation. It's just a performance test. If you're stopped at the cell or the module level, you need to take the data, redesign it, and then begin again. This testing, UL 9540A, requires one cell propagation, and the results of the test will actually help to inform the fire protection engineer to make sure that they have the right protection measures for that specific system. So the New York State Uniform Code. So I talked about the IFC, the International Code, and NFPA 855. Those two codes and standards will actually guide the new 25 fire code, which is exciting. So the Uniform Code, which is pictured here, is applicable again across New York State without need for local adoption. New York City does have its own separate codes, building, fire, and residential, and it applies only to New York City. And again, they're based on the International Code Council's model code. The thing that's unique about New York City's code is that they take the code and tailor it to New York City's characteristics. So New York City is kind of very tight, lots of people, so they tailor the code to speak to those conditions. So the updated New York State Fire Code, that's applicable everywhere except New York City because they have their own code. This will be released next year, and it's going to nick language from the recently updated International Fire Code. And it does appear that the Code Council has lifted some recommendation from the Interagency Working Group, which is also really exciting. And I'll talk about the Interagency Working Group in a little bit. So the Uniform Code is broken up into 3 sections: residential, fire, and building, and again, don't need to adopt it. So this is the residential code. It goes over the size, location, and separation requirements for BESS systems, and these are your small systems. So each unit must be 20 kilowatt hours or less. If it will be inside of a garage, it may have up to 40 kilowatt hours. If it's going to be placed outside, if the system will be placed outside, it can be up to 80 kilowatt hours as long as there is a 3 feet separation from other units. The code also talks about fire resistance ratings that are required for the walls and ceilings for any room or area that contains these systems. And then I mentioned before, so if a residential system undergoes or decides to opt to take the 9540A destructive test method, and that test says, for instance, that this energy storage system doesn't need to be kept 3 feet away, it can be kept 2 feet away, that can be waived based on the results of large-scale fire testing. Jumping into the fire code, there's a few things I'd like to highlight. As a part of New York State Uniform Code, Chapter 12, hazard mitigation analysis is required. This asks if the system fails, what systems, if you will, are in place to contain or control or limit that failure. Chapter 12 also requires large-scale fire testing, so UL 9540A or an approved equivalent, to make sure that fire will not spread into adjacent systems or areas, and it also informs necessary protections and any requirements that system needs. Again, it's not a data collection, it's a data collection test, not a certification. So we talked a little bit about this, but just to refresh it. So this slide kind of tells you what you can do right now. So making sure you have a fire remediation team, and we talked about that in the model law section, and then making sure you have peer review, and this is crucial. And then decommissioning plan, the commissioning plan rather. This plan basically makes sure that the system is installed properly, make sure everything works as intended, and is maintained properly. It also includes that wonderful decommissioning plan, so your end of life plan. This is just a little bit more information on fire remediation. So a fire remediation team ideally is paid for by the developer or the owner of the energy storage system. This requirement is put in place to alleviate fire services potentiality of babysitting an energy storage system after a fire or an emergency event took place. So the fire remediation company will actually be called to the scene to relieve the fire department and actually begin the decommissioning process. They're there to give support, to give advice, to guide the fire department. Peer review. Just a slide that explains why it's so crucial. This is an emerging technology, and it's not anticipated that every municipality will have the technical skills to assess an application. So a peer review will allow a qualified third-party expert to come in and assist you to make sure that the project has all the permitting requirements that's required, to review the 9540A test results, to make sure the system is installed safely and to code. You want to make sure that the person or the organization doing the peer review has the credentials of both education and experience to evaluate risks and to enforce best management practices associated with the design and operation of BESS systems. Continuing on into the fire code. So the thing I really like about the New York State Fire Code is that it understands that battery technologies are unique, are different. So different electrochemical technologies are regulated based on their different chemistries. And this table does a really great job of kind of illustrating that. So in lithium ion systems, which is this row right here, hopefully you can see my mouse, exhaust ventilation is not needed during normal charging or discharging. So it's not a requirement. Spill control and neutralization is not necessary because during normal charging and discharging, the electrolyte is contained. It can't spill. It's in like a little enclosed vessel. But the explosion control is a requirement. But if you comply with NFPA 68 or 69, you comply with the fire code requirements. Safety caps are primarily for lead-ion batteries. They're not applicable to lithium ion. And then thermal runaway provisions are required for batteries, just like they are required for car batteries or the ones in your TV or remote. The New York State Fire Code also details location-specific requirements. So whether the system will be installed indoor or as a dedicated or non-dedicated use, or as an outdoor facility that's near exposures or remote. And you can see examples of that in the picture, where you have item 1 as a dedicated use indoor facility. Item 2 is a non-dedicated use building. You can see other things are going on. Picture 3 is an outdoor use near exposures. And then picture 4 is outdoor, kind of remote from everything. Yes. So this, again, each of these different systems have different requirements that are applicable to them due to their proximity to other items. This is an example of a walk-in installation unit, and it's a really good image to see kind of how a container system, if you will, is designed. So you have item 1 here. This is your battery rack. So these you can see lined up along the walls of the container. Item 2, you have your fire suppression system. It's more than just a fire extinguisher. It's often a system built in or as a part of the BESS system. You have your energy management system, item 3. You have your HVAC system to keep it cool, battery controlled panel, and your power inverter. So this is just very quickly what it looks like. A couple of cabinets. So this is an example of a BESS cabinet. These house batteries and can be installed outdoors. They're typically in the kilowatt hour range, maybe about 100 kilowatt hours, this picture. This is an example of an outdoor cabinet system. Size and separation compliance is not required when the system is considered remote. So this system is about approximately a megawatt. So for outdoor installations, the fire code requires that 10 feet of clearance is required around the footprint of the system. This distance can be used as a fire barrier. It can be reduced either by large-scale fire testing. So if you do 9540A and that test says you can put it 9 feet, then that's something the developer can consider if the test verifies that that's the case. The fire barrier should be at least a 1 hour fire rated. And the second option is if buildings is for the building that is adjacent to the energy storage system is non-combustible and has a 2 hour fire rating. So there is a little bit of not wiggle room, but kind of choose your own adventure, if you will, when it comes to these systems to make sure that you follow the code. Per the fire code, these units can be installed outside if it meets a number of requirements identified on the slide. So these are your residential systems, so less than 20 kilowatt hours, installed according to the manufacturer's specifications, has unit separation, is more than 5 feet away from doors, windows, etc. There's an exception again to that large-scale fire testing. If the fire testing says it can be placed a little bit closer, then and the test can prove that, then the developer may elect to choose that option. And this should look familiar to you. It's the same as the residential code that we went over earlier. Jumping now into the Interagency Fire Safety Working Group. So in July of last year, in response to a number of fires, the governor convened the Interagency Fire Safety Working Group, aka the working group, because that's a mouthful. This is a really great group. It included a number of agency partners, including Division of Homeland Security, Office of Fire Prevention and Control, NYSERDA, DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, Department of Public Service, and Department of State. There is also, because it still exists, is a number of specialized subject matter experts. And these are people that are in the top of the field who know this material inside and outside. And fire protection engineering firms, New York National Labs, and the New York Power Authority. And this working group was convened to understand, to collect and assess water, air, soil, and water testing at the sites, review emergency response actions and data, examine root cause analysis. They also reviewed the code, standards, and regulations and developed recommendations for revisions and enhancements. And that recommendation was actually supplied to the Department of State for inclusion in the update to the New York State Fire Code, which is really exciting. And then a inspection of all in-service battery energy storage systems. So what were the results of that? So the Interagency Fire Safety Working Group, the working group, concluded that the current regulations are sufficient and up to date. They did include a number of recommendations to go above and beyond, but they are the things that we went over on the slide. So, and basically making things mandatory. So right now, as an example, in the code, it says that municipalities have the authority to require peer review, but instead of having the authority, the working group recommends it be required because they're noticing a lot of municipalities weren't requesting that peer review. That's a really good example. So you do have the broad authority to require battery storage safety. We went over that when we went over the model law. So this next slide, or next set of slides, is advice given for first responders to make sure that they receive the best training to assess BESS fires. So you want to make sure that when you're getting the training that you get site-specific project overview. So the initial training should be provided to the fire department, ideally once the system is energized, to familiarize the fire department with the purpose of the system and use cases. You also want to make sure You understand the site layout. Where is everything? Where's the electrical shutoffs, the fire alarm panels, etc. You should know where the critical signage is, not just directly on the system, but on the perimeter of the fences. And that should include emergency contact information. We also recommend a physical walkthrough of the site to just familiarize the fire department with the site. And then multiple trainings. I mentioned having trainings annually just to make sure that in case there's any turnover or different shifts, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. The next kind of training you want to make sure is the battery system itself. So you want to understand the type of batteries you have, the number of racks, the number of cells, etc. What are the different fire detection systems that system has? What are the different suppression systems that have? Whether it's detection, it's going to be heat, smoke, or gas detection. If it's suppression, it's going to be water-based or non-water-based if applicable. And then you want to understand the explosion prevention systems. So where the deflagration vent panels are. In the unlikely event of a fire, you might hear panels go kind of up, like fly up, and that's actually designed in the system. So you want to make sure you know where those panels are and where they might go if the system kicks them out. The next thing you want to understand is associated hazards. So you want to understand what thermal runway is, what can cause a fire, what explosion, like what are the hazards associated with the system. The next one is the emergency response. So this is, I talked about it a little bit before, but it's worth highlighting again. You want to make sure there is a site-specific emergency response plan, ERP, that should be provided on projects. This provides details on the system, the size, any site-specific guidance for fire departments, first responders, etc. This should include staging locations, how to effectively use water if you're to use it at all, who's going to be notified if alarms are triggered, who's going to be responding, how will the fire department be notified. You want to make sure you understand that knowledgeable representatives of the systems are able to respond on site to assist and guide fire departments. If a fire watch will be needed, what are the handoff procedures? And then briefly go over emergency decommissioning and disposal of that system. So my next two slides are kind of fact and fiction. So a statement you'll hear is that lithium-ion batteries cannot be safely disposed. So recycling is actually already happening in New York State. So they should not end up in municipal waste streams. So there's so these systems, something that's false, these systems are only needed for appropriate in dense population centers. They're actually needed everywhere. We talked about grid reliance on that really pretty diagram from Rocky Mountain Institute about how it's important for grid reliability, elimination of those fossil fuel generating peaker plants, and the integration of renewable energy systems when the sun isn't shining, when the wind isn't blowing. Fiction. There are no adequate safety standards in place for these systems. That is not true. So we went through a number of safety standards and codes that are applicable statewide, and they're constantly evolving, which is really, really exciting. And they will continue to evolve to address not just lithium ion, but any other technology that comes up. And we discussed a number of these codes today. Fiction is you cannot use water to extinguish a lithium battery fire. So water can be an effective agent for cooling and extinguishing fires, but again, it depends on the system, and you want to make sure that you speak to the developer, the owner of the system, to make sure you understand when and when not to use water. But it is something that can be a very effective agent for cooling. Fiction. BESS will pollute the environment. Even if firefighters use water on a system, it will produce toxic runoff. So water is a very suitable substance for cooling and extinguishing these fires. It minimizes the need for spray foams or gels, which may contain harmful chemicals. And putting water on a BESS fire is not unlike any other fires. It's a strategy that first responders may need to use to minimize impacts. Fiction. These batteries produce toxic gases that will negatively affect air in the communities. So that is inaccurate. So they do not off-gas or produce emissions during operation. So we talked about that slide that showed the different technologies and what's required in the fire code. And off-gassing is not something that occurs during normal operations. The next one is batteries produce a ton or excess noise. So we talked about this a little bit during the code section. So the only noise from the system is the HVAC system, and you definitely want the HVAC system. And again, that's just an air conditioning unit, if you will. So if you appropriately site these projects, it will make sure that that noise will not be an issue for neighbors of the project. Whew, I talked a lot. So on my last slide, I'll just highlight a couple things. So we are constantly updating our resources, our guidebooks, our local guidance, etc. And so I've just kind of screenshotted and highlighted a couple of these out for you today. And I will open it up for questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Camille. Can you hear me okay? I just switched over to my earpods because the crickets were making a lot of noise out here. Just another housekeeping. I did just upload the slides again. I saw a request in the questions box, so that's in the chat feature. You can download a PDF of the slides. Looking at the questions, they mostly seem to deal with fire issues. It's not surprising. There was a question in the chat, which I don't think the rest of the audience could see. Due to potential fire hazards, are there standards for distances from other structures or utility installations? I know you know, these questions were coming in at various points throughout the presentation. I think you may have covered some of this, but I'm just going to go ahead and read at least the fire safety ones, you know, and I'll let you respond perhaps comprehensively or take them one at a time. It takes about 2,000 gallons of water to extinguish a burning gasoline-powered vehicle. Putting out an EV fire can take 10 times more. Sorry, when people put a new question, I lose the text. What is the plan to extinguish these much larger storage lithium-ion batteries?
So for that, I'll take them one at a time just so I can.
Okay.
But I might hit a number of them as I answer this one.
Sure.
As I said, so water is one of the methods that fire department might look to use if the facility owner says that that's a good idea for that specific system. So it depends specifically on that system. And sometimes with these systems, you don't want to apply water. You just want it to burn out. And a lot of systems are designed to just burn out. So as long as you are staying, you know, outside the allocated area, you might not need water, and you just sometimes need to let it burn out. So it depends on the system.
Okay. And kind of related to that, and probably more up the alley of our planning board members in the audience, is there going to be a plan to have fire hydrants in the area of install?
Typically, no, that's not part of the design, again, because water is not required. Water may not be required depending on that exact system or that type of technology. So no, it won't be a part of an application for a project.
Okay. All right, another question. Are there specific fire suppression systems that could be on site specific to lithium chemistry combustion?
No, there are no specific fire suppression systems that are applicable. Yeah. But
Okay.
the fire department, a normal fire department, if you will, will have the tools if you need it. A lot of times it's simply to let it burn.
Okay.
And the system itself often has suppression mechanisms. We talk about on the slide that showed the, maybe I can pull it up. On the slide that showed kind of what thermal runway is in the preventative region and the containment region, there are a number of fire suppression mechanisms built into these systems, so there isn't a separate system that the fire department needs.
Another question, and this one is about one of like the smaller. I mean, most of the time people think about these, and I'm guilty of that too. We think about the big, almost an industrial sized facilities, but you also talked about these small home sized ones. So there's a question, what kind of insulation is there for your home when a lithium ion battery burns in excess of 1200 degrees Fahrenheit?
So the New York State Fire Code does have very specific fire resistant rating requirements that are specific for the walls and rooms and areas containing the energy storage systems. So I would definitely recommend taking a look at the fire code for that. I don't have that memorized on the top of my head.
Okay. And this is just, my thoughts coming up at this. I mean, it strikes me that there might be some limited applicability to these systems, particularly in older houses. Building codes have changed over the years, and houses have existed for a very long time. I imagine it might just be a situation where, unless the owner is willing to do some serious structural upgrades, perhaps a home BESS system isn't in the cards. Would you agree with?
Oh, right, or it could be not placed within the building. It could be placed, X feet away from the home or the structure.
That's true. I mean, I think of them. I remember I've seen images of the Tesla power banks, and typically in a garage.
Yeah.
That's also where people are charging their Teslas, but that's always an option, I imagine. Okay, a question. Since the best way to mitigate and contain a fire in a BESS is a large amounts of water, why isn't a sprinkler/deluge being recommended to be installed with these units? Or sprinkler/deluge system being recommended?
So I talked about that a little bit. So sometimes water isn't the best option. Sometimes you do just want to let the system burn. And so each BESS system is designed with the protection mechanisms designed for that system. So I mentioned the UL 9540A testing. So that destructive test method will tell the fire protection engineer what systems are required for that specific system. So it isn't a blanket, water is good for everything. Each system is unique.
This one, I don't, I think I'll give you permission to say no comment, but do you know much about the fire at the Warwick BESS?
No, I mean, yes, I think everyone is aware of it. I'm not sure how to answer that.
Okay. I mean, no specific information.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question is, who's going to pay for all these new requirements, especially all our towns in Rockland have volunteer firefighters?
So requirements. So the for most of the things I said, so requiring peer review, requiring the fire mitigation personnel, all of that should be the developer kind of footing the bill for that. So it shouldn't be that the volunteer fire department has to pay for that, like peer review or fire mitigation personnel. Or for their emergency response plans. All of that should be on the developer to have that. Same thing goes with the commissioning requirements. So I spoke of section 1206.9.1 part 11, where the developer needs to prove that they have a contract with someone that's going to service, maintain, and decommission the system. Like all of that is on the developer to foot the bill for that.
We have one question. Why would you place a BESS near a residential area?
Yes, so BESS systems can be anywhere from a very small residential system like a Tesla power plant, or name your company power plant, but larger systems, I think you're referring to larger systems. So I think if the system is designed to code, if the application is reviewed by a qualified third-party peer reviewer to make sure that they have the commissioning plan, the fire mitigation personnel, emergency response plan, site-specific training, like if you make sure you check all of those boxes, and it follows fire code, international code, New York State code, etc., then yes, I think within those parameters, yes.
This is a wordy one. I want to get this right. From this excellent presentation, I gather that the maximum aggregate array storage capacity for residential battery storage systems is 80 kilowatt hours. Are there any provisions being considered for greater storage capacity at some later date as technology improves?
Thank you. And I believe so. So I can't speak of a specific technology, but I was just at the ACE New York conference, and I am Alliance for Clean Energy, something, but a really good conference today where they talked about the need for having long-term duration energy storage to make up for that gap, because it isn't just the short-term kind of storage that we need. We also need long duration storage. So yes, I imagine that there's going to be a push for it, because it's going to be a really key piece in ensuring resiliency across the state.
What is the expected timeline for a municipality from first submission to approval to construction to opening / bringing a BESS online?
So that's a good question, and it depends on the municipality. If the municipality has and follows like very strict timelines, it could be streamlined anywhere from submission of approval to getting from I'd say 2, 3, 4 years. But again, it depends on the municipality and the regulations that the developer will need to follow according to the code. But anywhere, I would say year is optimistic. So 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ish. Also, depending on the supply chain is another little hurdle.
Okay. Can you use foam to fight the fire?
This is going to be my answer for all the questions. It depends on the system. It depends on what the system owner says and that emergency response plan. And it depends on the kind of foam, I suppose. So I'm going to say it might be possible. That is one of the things that I listed on that circle slide. Maybe not foam, but yeah, perhaps depending on the system, which isn't the cleanest answer, but every system is so variable.
And this is an interesting one. Where does this fit in? It's interesting for me. I don't know how interesting it is for other people. Where does this fit in for members of zoning boards who deal with variances?
That is an interesting question. So I used to be a solar developer, so I'm currently putting on my solar developer hat. If I was a best friend, okay. So it would depend on what your zoning code is. So how will this affect variances? It depends on what variances they're looking to get. What variances are they looking to get?
Well, I mean, I think like the larger question is, you know, there are certain standards written into law for getting a bulk variance. You know, when you're talking about, you know, residential development, commercial development, or we're talking about the standard measurements of the bulk requirements. You know, could these be put to a higher standard than the typical bulk variances? I mean, my answer, I think, would be yes, or at the very least, a zoning board of appeals should, you know, exercise a higher level of scrutiny. I don't know if the model law addresses variances at any point.
We don't address variances, but I will take that back to the guidebook committee, which is me, and I will ask me what I think. So let me make a note. Zoning variances.
Yeah.
So if it's, yeah, I'm gonna take that one back and see if there's anything that we can update with respect to variances. Yeah,
I mean, anything that's in state fire code wouldn't be, wouldn't be applicable.
mhm.
But you did mention that, certain things are not required by the fire code, and forgive me, I wasn't able to keep up with every detail that you mentioned, but it seems like, I imagine there is some guardrail somewhere, but I'm not sure exactly where they are as to making sure that these physical requirements, which are significantly more important than just the standard, set keeping, one house certain distance away from the neighbors for privacy or whatever.
Mhm.
So,
Can I
So-
chime in on that for a second?
Sure, Rich.
I'm just a little confused by the question, because wouldn't it depend, if a municipality had a battery energy storage law and they were to develop bulk standards for that, for those facilities, then the variances that would be requested would be depend on those bulk standards, no? I mean, are we putting a cart before the horse here with saying, what are the variances going to be without, unless they have specific bulk standards for the siting of these systems?
That's my understanding as well. Because whenever I needed to get a variance, it was because the project wasn't able to meet or couldn't at that time meet the setbacks or the lot size requirements. So
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that is the advantage of a community having a battery energy storage law and putting bulk standards in place. If they don't have standards in place and somebody wants to cite a facility, then that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thank you for chiming in there, Rich. Appreciate it. Another question, where would fire mitigation personnel be coming from? What would their typical what would be their typical response time compared to the local fire department?
that is, so the fire mitigation personnel, these are, let me go to that slide to make sure I say all the things. I almost have these slides there. Oh, there you are. So the fire mitigation, I believe you said, they should be selected by the developer. And their response time, that I'm not 100% sure. I think in the draft code, there's a requirement for a 4-hour response time, but don't quote me on that. I do actually highly recommend you take a look at the draft fire code from the Department of State that's available and open for public comment, because I think there's a time limit. I think it's 4 hours in that draft code.
Okay. All right. And I don't see any more open questions. Just checking in the chat. We have one person noting that whatever is put in local zoning code can be changed by the Zoning Board of Appeals. So again, something that's not subject to to building code would fall. That would be the the jurisdiction. So all right, so I'm not seeing any other questions. So it's a little early, but I think you've talked for quite a lot. Oh, Donald, sorry, question, table of variances. I'm not sure what that question is, Don, sorry. I'll give you a moment to elaborate before we sign off, but just want to remind people I did put the slides in the chat. If anybody wants to download them, they should be able to do that. They can also email me. I shared my email before. Also, like I said at the beginning, if people need a certificate of attendance, and again, if you're in Rockland County, I have you in our database. We share the database with your municipalities frequently, so you don't necessarily need one. But if you're outside of Rockland County, you'd like to get a certificate of attendance, please shoot me an email and include your name, municipality, and board. Got a Okay, Don says not a question. Thank you. One more question that came up. Would it be improper to mandate the developer have fire mitigation personnel on site at all times? Much like a water/wastewater plant must have licensed staff in the building.
I would say yes to this. So behind the scenes and not specifically on site, there is a person or a team that monitors the information that comes out of the battery management system. So the eyes and ears, the brain of the system. And so they're responsible for making sure that everything, that the kind of data coming out of those systems is accurate. So having someone kind of 24 hours sitting, in one of these facilities would be financially a difficult ask, because 99.2% of the time they're just going to sit in a field with containers all day.
Well, doing a pretty good job sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe if they're a bird watcher.
Just bring a book with you, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So back to just the last housekeeping wrap-ups. Someone actually in the chat mentioned, are there plans for sessions 1, 2, or 3 over Zoom? He's referring to the Federation does a certification series. We just refer to them as sessions 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 were done in person in the spring. We will hold session 2, the update of case law, in the fall. The date to be determined. Don't quote me on it. I'm shooting for end of October. Sorry. I'd prefer to do a Zoom just because we do the other one in person, but that's not definitive yet. So nothing else scheduled at the moment, but we will be doing session 2 in the fall at some point. And just the last thing I want to do is just thank everybody, thank our panelists, thank you, Rich, for the information about county's new program. Thank you, Mina, for all the work you do with HVRC and giving us the information about the clean energy communities. And most importantly, thank you, Camille. You spoke, covered a very technical topic, kept it interesting, and just your voice didn't give out. So I just want to thank you very much for sharing your time, sharing your expertise with us. The Federation couldn't do these sessions without people like you sharing your time and knowledge. And also just want to thank everybody for coming, especially our target audience, our land use board members. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. Being on a land use board member is a thankless job most of the time. So I take this opportunity to thank you for the time you donate and volunteer to your community and all the work that you do. And just one last thing, it's mostly cloudy, but tonight there is a partial eclipse of a harvest supermoon, which will peak around 10:45. So if it clears up by you, take a look outside. Hopefully it'll be pretty cool. But that's it. Just one last check. The questions, sorry, I think I covered that, and we talked a little bit about the bulk variances. So I think that's it for our questions. And with that, I'll say good night and thank you all again.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you.